Hello, everyone. This is Aaron Christensen. You're watching Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. We're right on the brink of Halloween, everybody. The link to donate is below in the description of this video. Please make a contribution. And I'm going to bring in my panel to chat about When Evil Lurks. And let's say hello to Tim Pallas.
How's it going, everyone?
Jon Kitley.
Good morning.
S.A. Bradley.
Hey, how's it going?
And Jason Coffman.
Hello, do you like my Halloween costume?
I'm
Jigsaw, young Jigsaw from Saw 6.
Well, we'll talk about Saw 6 another time. Tonight, we're talking about When Evil Lurks from 2023 from our awesome director, Demian Rugnar, which is an awesome name, by the way, if you're going to be directing horror films. From Argentina. Everybody here has seen Terrified, which was the first film, I think, that kind of went on everybody's radar. And that one knocked me out. I saw that maybe 2 years ago for the Scare-A-Thon, in fact. And that one just blew me away. So when I heard he had a new one coming out, I was very excited. How many of you got to see it in the theater?
I did.
Yeah. All right. So, Tim, you didn't see it in the theater?
When Evil Lurks or Terrified?
Sorry. When Evil Lurks, this newest one.
Oh,
yeah.
When Evil Lurks. Yeah, I saw that in the theater.
Yeah, I don't think anybody got to see Terrified in the theater because we didn't know.
No.
Nor did it make it itself available to us.
I just watched Terrified today.
Yep.
For the first time. So.
Oh, wow.
And I think, Jason, you saw it today as well, yeah?
Yeah, I rewatched both of them today.
As soon as I finished When Evil Lurks, I flipped on Terrified. So, yes, I'm steeped in Rugna. The basic premise is that there are two brothers, and they get a call that there is a rotten out just outside the village. And a rotten, as we come to find out, is someone who is possessed. And they go to check it out. And, well, evil lurks in a big old way. I don't think we can get into the particulars and without throwing up the spoilers banner, which we will, because this movie is streaming on Shudder right now, and everybody should go and watch it pronto. Let's just go around really quick. Tim, let's start with you. Basic feelings, impressions about both Terrified and this film.
So I wasn't familiar with Terrified at all. I hadn't heard of it. But I guess from that word of mouth, a lot of people were talking about When Evil Lurks coming and with a limited theatrical release. So definitely got my interest going. Went to see it by myself when I could. Yeah, just sitting there not knowing what to expect, kind of went in blind. But yeah, just a feeling of dread, just tense the whole time. It kind of felt like it was moving fast and in slow motion at the same time. But yeah, hadn't had that feeling in a while in the theater for a new movie. So good stuff.
And John?
I caught Terrified on Prime last year and knew nothing about it. It just blew me away. So when this new one came out, when I found out it was playing locally in the theater, I saw it a couple of days before it left. And like Tim, there was two other people in the theater, and I was there by myself or with those other two people. And yeah, had no idea really what the movie was about, but you're just sitting there going, oh no. But I loved it.
Scott?
Yeah, Terrified, same thing. I when it came out on streaming, I saw it, and I was at that moment where I was just going through every movie that I could find because we were still in the pandemic in that way, and it blew me away. The very opening sequence, I said, "Oh, if they can keep the intensity of this opening sequence and this weird surprise, Terrified's going to be something else," and it did. So I heard about Rugna's new one, When Evil Lurks. Through word of mouth, like was said. I went to a theater near me, very limited release, obviously. The only people that were in there, I was the only white boy. Everybody else is Latino. And there was a real interesting way that people were responding. There's something in that movie that I may not understand, some version of lapsed Catholicism, but there was a lot of discomfort. You could feel the discomfort when certain things were said, like not using electric lights resonated with a bunch of people in that audience. So it was total dread the whole time. Also like a weird glee, like, oh shit, that disturbed me. And I'm like, oh, that's such a great feeling. It's so great to be surprised again. So I really enjoyed my time watching it. I had to watch it a second time to really get it, I think.
Yeah. And I just, a friend of mine who is Guatemalan texted me and said, you have to watch this movie. Like she'd just seen it on Friday night. And I was like, okay, it's on my list. It's late. I'm watching it in a half an hour. So but I think there is something about that Latin American quality that really lands, at least with her. And it sounds like with the other members of your audience, Scott. Yeah. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, at first I saw Terrified when it hit Shudder. I think Shudder picked it up during its festival run and just immediately dropped it. But it came off that festival run with just such a runaway train of hype. And I knew a bunch of people who had seen it and they were very excited about it. So I watched it at home and I liked it, but I wasn't floored by it really. So yeah, after watching When Evil Lurks a few weeks ago, my friend and I went, and I think there were 2 other people in the theater with us. Again, it's just, it's weird. Opened the same weekend, ended up as Exorcist Believer too, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, I was floored by When Evil Lurks. So
well, and the fact that Exorcist Believer, despite just resoundingly awful critical reception and audience response, just crested the 100 million mark worldwide.
Yeah.
And this film is, eking its way along in limited release and is getting amazing word of mouth. And you're just kind of like, it's like 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm just like, this is like when I say it's not the movie's fault, it's the audience. It's like, it's not the horror fans that are going to take this over the top. It's going to be the general public. And they all wanted to go see an Exorcist movie at Halloween. So I think that's kind of where we landed with that. I'm really glad it's on Shudder now, and I hope a lot of people discover it there.
Yeah. This is the real Exorcist movie. This is the real.
Agreed.
possession.
Yeah. I mean, and we will get into spoilers in a second, but I mean, I don't think it's any secret that it is about a possession. It's about a demon or some evil entity wanting to be born. And I love the fact, I think this kind of falls into, several of us were on that folk horror documentary episode talking about, the things that come from lore.
Yeah.
And this very much feels like we're just dropped into that, where people know what a rotten is and they have all these rules that are attached to it, and they know how to deal with these things. And I just felt like I love just being dropped in the middle of that mythology, because I was like going, wait, I'm having to play catch up a lot.
Yeah. There's even children's songs about it, right?
That's what I really admired about it, that it was completely original. And the fact that it doesn't do what we typically get in Hollywood films, where here's the story, here's a little prologue, okay, is everybody on the same page? Okay, then the story starts. This one starts in the middle of it. We're, like you said, we're playing catch up as we're going on. We're fed the information, and I think it's highly effective. And I love the fact that it's like nothing that I've seen before.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time since there's been a movie that has made me feel that sense of dread on a couple of different times, where you're just like, oh no, they did.
Yeah. Our 2 brothers, Pedro and Jaime, or Jimmy, as the subtitles sometimes call, he goes between the 2 of them. And I wasn't sure if that was somebody or if that's like a nickname, Jaime versus Jimmy. But those are the 2, and Pedro is the one in the beard, and Jimmy has the mustache. And they are called to deal with this rotten situation, and then they are kind of sent to the officials to kind of say, hey, this was reported a year ago, we find out, and nothing has been done about it. And I think there's some definite commentary going on there about the city folk versus the rural areas, or the moneyed versus the non-moneyed. It's so easy to just ignore the problem, and it'll become somebody else's problem.
They even mentioned several times, many of the characters, when being asked if they've ever seen a rotten, they say no, that's a city thing. So you kind of see like the disconnect, like that's a different world and they're not even familiar with it. I think maybe that goes back to the electric lights and stuff like that too. Just
Mm.
like this big city type of thing. But yeah, it's definitely present. A little divide between society there.
And they go to the authorities. I mean, there's that aggression towards the country
Mhm.
folk. I mean, they're ready to pull their guns out on them, like, get away from us, you know? So there is that definite separation between the city and the country people. And yeah, that has to have some sort of implication from that area.
Well, I think that's interesting when they go to visit the police and there's that weird dynamic. Because at that point, you don't really know anything about Pedro and Jimmy.
Right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
later, you sort of get the backstory and it makes more sense why the cops would be immediately aggressive.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really like the way that that was played out and the way it was written and executed in the movie.
Yeah, he's like a deadbeat dad. We don't know. Is he like an alcoholic who hit her? You know, we don't know what the nastiness was. And I'm not, I get the city thing, but I don't think we ever got to the city. I don't think the police station is in the city. I think that this is rich, poor, and people education level, or what the people who are forward thinking and the people who are backward thinking, because there's that whole thing consistently of, oh, this is a fairy tale. The only people that I know that have seen these things are my son and the other son, and you know, they're not very believable at a lot of times. There's something about Pedro that is already he's not reliable. You know, and so we have somebody who may be the only hope that we have, who's thoroughly unreliable. These two schmucks are the people who are going to be taking care of this problem. And their idea is to, you know, there was a moment when I looked at this movie the second time, I said, my God, this is like a very dour version of Fearless Vampire Killers. You know, this doesn't have to leave this village, right? It can die there. You know, it's, but we have these two people who are going to save everything, and they take it out into the real world and it starts to spread. And it's like the best intentions are the things that kill in this thing. And at one point, the monster says that to Pedro, right? You're the reason all this happens. Yeah. It's the first non-lie the thing tells.
I'm going to throw up the spoilers banner just so we can kind of dig into the meat of it. What you just pointed out, Scott, and other people, is Pedro is not a hero. And he is put in the hero's role. And we're following this guy who can't be relied on and who consistently messes things up. And throughout the movie, I mean, the fact that like this is our protagonist, I found that frustrating just as a viewer. That I'm like, oh my God, they just told you don't do that, and you did it. And they just told you don't do that, and you did it. And I'm just like, it was, and he's our only hope. And you go, well, we're in trouble then, because he's not going to serve us. There's the one character who says, it says to him, "You moved a rotten," just like, right. You idiot, you know. But that's who this guy is. And I texted John after I watched it. And I said, one of the things that I found a little unsatisfying, just a little, was the fact that everything is predicated on the fact that people do things that they're told explicitly not to do.
Right. And
we watch them do it. And it isn't like they accidentally did it. Like it says, please don't do that thing. And then they do it and bad things happen. And I just found myself kind of disconnecting from the movie. I'm like, well, if I'm going to be in the hands of Dumb and Dumber, then, you know, how invested can I get? Right. Which is not to say there aren't incredible horror moments. Like there's like a great scare like every 20 minutes where I was just like, oh man, that was awful. I did not enjoy watching that. But I did find it troubling that I was shackled to these two, watching them consistently like just go right down the list of things not to do and like, okay, check that box, check that box, check that box, etc.
Yeah, I agree completely. The plot doesn't move forward without people's bad decisions. And so even not just the brothers Ruiz in the beginning, the landowner kind of kicks that off. explicitly told not to use firearms,
Yes,
bringing
but
out the gun immediately.
to his defense, I think something jumped or scared, and that's when he pulled the trigger. It wasn't.
He was
It
still
wasn't-
holding it to
I-
attack.
Yeah,
No.
He was going to
But
do it for sure.
here's the
goat
thing, though.
bleeded.
He was threatening it, and that goat walks right up to it and
Yeah.
puts his head in
Yeah.
there like, "I fucking dare you!"
Yeah,
And then
that
he
was
makes a noise, and he actually jumps. So I got to give him a little bit of leeway. But I didn't think that they were making these mistakes intentionally. It was just in the thick of it. And I also like the fact that we didn't get the Tom Cruise hero that's going to do everything by the book and do
Right.
he's the hero. These guys are two simple farmers or whatever their profession was. They're not the smart guys.
right.
They are thrust into the hero role, but they're not heroes.
Nope.
Well, that's why I was not being facetious when I said this is the Exorcist. This is the modern Exorcist that we should have. I've been having this conversation with people about how scary is the Exorcist at this point. The original movie at its time, scary as hell. But if you're a kid coming up in a very secular world, how can this be as impactful? And I think this movie says something that, it's almost like the old 50-year-old knock-knock joke now, The Exorcist. It's going to be two guys that come in and do this thing. Who's there? Pazuzu who? But the thing is, what we have now is God is dead. Churches are ended quickly. There were monks who taught us there was a different way of doing things from what the old way was. So could evil finally start to really spread when people don't believe the fairy tale anymore? And I think that that's what this movie is saying. You have this whole thing of like the grandmother doesn't even believe, right? She's talking about the tale. Oh, there's 7 things. I can't remember what the 7th thing is. And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ. You're holding all the cards and yet you're not holding the cards. So there's this idea of evil laughing now that all of these things that were in place are gone. And I think that's really the scary thing that could be there for The Exorcist when there's no real idea of religion anymore. It's just the idea of evil just circulating like that. And I thought that was really, it hit me that I was not interested in the Exorcist story anymore, but I was really interested in this idea that really takes it into a secular world and makes it more about like what happened before, and what is happening now.
Well, and just a quick checklist. We have don't use electric lights. Don't do anything with animals. No
Always
No
a good idea.
firearms.
no precious possessions. Don't hurt
firearms.
them. No firearms. Don't move the evil,
Mhm.
and don't be afraid of dying.
Yes.
And that don't be afraid of dying is the one that the mother forgets. But I mean, we just go right down the line with like, oh man. And even the mom who says, don't name the demon, like names the demon. And the kid like goes, you're saying the name. And
Yes.
I'm like, oh
Yeah, we're not really afraid of this. That's why, right? That's what I think is so cool about this, is that everybody's laissez-faire because are you really afraid of the Jolly Green Giant? No, there's no Jolly Green Giant. So you may say this stuff, but you're saying it laissez-faire. But the reality is there is a Jolly Green Giant. It's right behind you and it's going to kill you. And I thought that was great.
I think that that's really one of the things that works so well. I watched The Exorcist Believer today in preparation for this. I was just too curious. And it's really funny that they released on the same day, because that movie is like not too different from every Exorcist movie and every exorcism movie for like the last 50 years. They all use the same, the same structure, same tropes and everything.
Yeah.
And what this one does is it almost completely removes religion, and it makes this like demonic possession thing like almost like a cosmic horror thing.
Yeah, right.
Like it's like the church can't do anything about it because it's not like the devil. It's not like God fighting something. It's like something else completely different. And it moves it from that, like, it's still a supernatural thing, but it moves it out of that supernatural area a little bit and moves it more into science. And that's what Terrified does as well. Like Terrified is a bunch of like scientists going to document stuff. And one of them even has like a box with this like brass, this brass thing that she builds. It looks like the one for the cleaners.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Well, and I do love our cleaner, Mirka, thank you, who's the one who, basically says you moved a rotten, are you an idiot or something? But she's also, I think, again, we start off from the very beginning, don't move it and don't use firearms. We hear that repeatedly when they're dealing with Uriel, the son who's, basically just kind of decomposing and swelling, and that the demon is inside. And then we see them, they thankfully don't use a firearm, but they come real close a couple times. But then they take this body away, and then it just falls out of the back of the truck somewhere. Do they bother going back to find it? Like they're like, oh, it was like 10 minutes back. Also, didn't they have to go back the same way? I mean, like they were literally driving out of town. Didn't they go back the same way? I'm just
Yeah. I mean, they swerved to miss the kid.
Right.
So that does lead up kind of to the ending with the children. So I get it. But yeah, it's just a lot of bad decisions that keep this thing going.
I love from the very beginning of the movie, though, there was this immediacy and there was, you have nothing that you can grab onto. The opening shot is like a window. We don't know where that window is. We hear gunfire. And then it pulls out. It's like no insert shots, just pulls out. And you have these guys talking, looking out. Is that on our property or is that in the forest? Is that in the farm? And I love that because you're all of a sudden, you're paying attention. I hate the thing, like I can watch a million trailers on Shudder, right, and it's always 5 people in a car driving into the woods. And, it's like, Jesus, come on, just get us in there. And I really loved how from the very beginning, they find a body. We don't, there's not even a face, there's just legs, right? Yeah. And so there's nothing, you're getting nothing. You're getting information that's being given to you. You're filling in. That wonderful thing that movies can sometimes do for us is have us fill in the story without telling us a lot. So we already know that Ruiz is some kind of fucker that we don't really want to deal with. We don't know if he's the landowner or what, but he's already somebody we're not going to like. Is it a poacher? We don't know. Mysterious box. I love that shit. So I really enjoyed how he's telling the story.
And I think that was what I really did. Like, as I said earlier, like the idea of trying to keep up with it, like him staying ahead of it. And for me, I think it would have been a different movie had we seen the lights were on. They kept the electric lights on. And then somebody came and said, oh my God, no, you can't have electric lights on. But instead, they're told not to have electric lights. And then they have electric lights. I'm just like,
yeah.
Like,
oh, that just reminded me of a thing that I didn't realize until the second viewing was when they looked out of the cleaner is there with them and they're out by the house and they're going to turn on the lights to get out of town, whatever. And she looks and the town's lights are off and she goes, oh, they're following the protocol. I was like, fuck, that is so cool. Like all of a sudden, that whole deal is like, oh, it's like a tsunami alert out here in California. It's like alarm goes off and it's like, oh shit, we got rottens. Wow. And nobody knows. But
that's actually
somehow
the second time someone mentions the protocol. Also, the sheriff does when they go to talk to him, and he's like, there's a protocol for these things.
John, like when you were saying like it's in the heat of battle that they make bad decisions. I think the one that like really frustrated me was he was there like pulling up the stage when they're in that school, and she's saying don't leave, and he leaves.
He went to get the axe to break open because he couldn't get underneath there.
But you trusted that woman, didn't you?
Yes, but again, that's what in all honesty, I mean, I agree with you, Aaron, that they're not smart guys. They are not making the right decisions. But when you are put in the heat of that situation and you're trying to get these boards and you're frustrated, and here's a little kid saying, there's an axe in there.
Yeah.
Your first thought is, great, this will help me. And you're not thinking because he's not a stereotypical hero. He's thinking, this is the easiest way to do it. That's what I'm going to go. And of course he gets in there and goes, fuck.
Oh, he got me.
Yeah. Again.
Well, by that point, we know like what kind of guy Pedro is, and we know like how he like thinks, and it's so clearly like working on him that it's like a little kid. And he can't he can't bring himself to not trust her, although
Yeah,
2
it
minutes
doesn't.
earlier was slapping the shit out of her.
Yeah,
Is it-
that's why I thought of him as kind of like an alcoholic, but they don't ever say it because his
Right.
everything's so impulsive. Everything's so he's like a child.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
Yeah.
one bothered me too, AC, because
Well,
earlier he had said, "Oh, it's over at my dad's house," and he slaps her because he's smart enough at that moment to realize, you lie all the time. And then at this crucial moment where she goes, "Oh, there's an axe over there," it's like, my friend's friend is my enemy, or it's like really
Yeah.
weird.
5 minutes after the axe thing, he goes and bashes Uriel in the face.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
Didn't she just say stab him in the nape of the neck? Didn't she
Yeah.
just say that?
so
Yeah. In the 24 hours since I saw this, I've been obviously thinking about it and thinking about this conversation. It struck me that it was very similar to going through the pandemic, where they kept
Mhm.
telling us all the things to do and all the things not to do. And we
Yep.
kept watching people do things that we were explicitly
Exactly.
told
Yep.
not to.
Yep.
And it was an incredibly frustrating time. So I know that that was feeding into
Yes.
me. And I'm not going to say Rugna was applying that, but it certainly works for me to see it through that lens of Jesus Christ. All we have to do to stop this infection is everybody just do what you're told, stay home, put on the mask, etc. But people didn't do that. And so we
Yeah.
had a worldwide pandemic. And, I feel like this demonic possession, it feels very similar. This could have gone another way.
Yeah.
And because we were left in the hands of these two rubes, that's what we got. We got a world that's completely fucked now. It's, evil is going to win and it's going to lurk.
Yeah, you'll get infected. I think that's what one of the liar kids says at one point. Don't touch them, you'll get infected. So it was the idea that it was kind of like this thing. But I also, we've talked about the thing that was driving us crazy, but I think it's really important to talk about how wonderfully surprising this movie could be in
Yes, sorry.
brutality and how it felt like evil. In other words, there's movies that always say something about evil. And one thing that I'll say about Blatty is that it took a Jesuit to really get that sadism, that open sadism in a storyline, especially Exorcist 3, that diabolical evil, that when he's talking, it's much more evil than some of the actions. And this movie really does hit on moments where I was going, man, I can't believe you got that dour, that dark. And the timing is off as well. So it's like he extends sequences at certain points past your expectations. So that you're like not to give anything much away, but there's a dog sequence and a little girl that is in between another argument that's happening in a room. And as soon as you see the dog sniff clothing, you're waiting for this bomb to go off. And they do not let it happen quickly. And by the time you're just about ready to take a breath in between of moments of dread, it happens.
Yeah.
And when it does, it's almost funny. It's scary and it's
right so scary that it's funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
The way this is set up is so anti-Hollywood as far as a jump scare. It's perfect. And like whoever mentioned the Hitchcock thing with the bomb, the bomb is ticking when you see that dog sniff.
Mhm.
And then you see that shot with the camera behind the little girl and the dog. And there's that brief moment and the dog looks at the little girl and you're going, oh, fuck no. It's going to attack the dad or the mom. It is set up so perfectly. So you're sitting there squirming, knowing what, or not hoping what you think is going to happen is not going to happen. And it does.
Yeah, you're just sitting there waiting for it. And then they kind of pan out to it, and the kid comes running back in, trying to get someone's attention. And yeah, a little comical is like a little rag doll under there. So that really got me, even though I totally saw it coming. I'll say kind of knew what was going on with the mom when she took the kid later, and they're coming up behind her in the car. But them just keeping it on that, like brains falling out of this kid's head, and oh man, that stayed with me for a bit.
I really appreciated how no living thing was safe at any point. A friend of mine described it, I think, pretty much perfectly as Evil Dead as written by Cormac McCarthy.
Oh, wow.
And that's
should be a
the
blurb.
universe you're in. Like, that's like some horrible thing is going to happen to everybody, like no matter what. But yeah, that when the dog thing happened in the theater, yeah, I laughed out loud because I was just so like shocked and like
Yeah,
it's not funny, but you know,
it's the release.
yeah, it's that reaction, that like involuntary thing. Like I can't believe this is happening, and I'm at an AMC theater. Nicole Kidman just told me a little while ago about how this story is perfect and powerful.
The moment where Ruiz has the goat, when he shoots the goat, you don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think what happens is what you thought was going to happen. When
No.
you see the axe just coming
Yeah.
from the side,
Yeah.
and then the poster image, which thank goodness
Oh,
I've only ever seen
wow.
in thumbnail form, so I didn't really know what I saw. You know, a little axe, and it seemed like it was going backwards. I'm like, I wonder what that is. But then you see that like it's her facing the axe, and talk about things you've never seen before in a movie.
Phew.
I was like, wow, this, and it just kept going and going until she literally couldn't do it anymore. And I was like, wow, that is intense.
Yeah,
like
that's
that
what
one's
really-
gonna stay with me.
Yeah, that moment when the axe is still kind of going up, that's when it really hit me. I'm like going, Jesus Christ. And then she falls over. The thing that really got me the second time around, and it's not a big moment, but it's the moment when the child who's autistic
Yeah.
comes into the grandmother and says, Grandma, I'm hungry.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
And it's just that whole
cool.
the actress is so good. Like earlier too, the thing that John was talking about, getting caught up in the moment, the idea that she sees the mother in the room when she's on sleeping pills, and she comes downstairs and she's explaining, I'm down here because I'm so afraid. The idea that evil, literally having evil in front of you, something that doesn't fear dying, you cannot reason with, could care less about physics, is in front of you, how terrifying that would be. And the grandmother epitomizes that twice in the movie. That moment there where she's like, I'm so afraid, something's up there. First she says the mother's name, then she goes, something is up there. That really gave me chills. And then when the son comes in, it's like, it doesn't give a fuck. It may or may not have known that it was lost inside of a mind that it couldn't figure out. And then it finally did figure out and thought it was pantomiming perfectly well, that a child would come in and say, I'm going to be hungry, or if it's fucking with her, saying, oh, by the way, I'm this thing, but I'm also going to just come in and say, Grandma, will you make me tea? And her look, like she's not screaming or anything. It's that O'Malley's bar moment where the guy is like sitting there and the guy has gunned everybody down, and he comes over and says, I live next to you. And he's like, really? That whole thing of like, it blows your mind. And she's so terrified. She just becomes like an animal that's cowering. I thought was incredible. With all the gore and stuff in there, you have this one moment where you realize that the director's not just about the gore.
Yeah, agreed. There was a movie came out a few years back, completely different tone, but the film Don't Kill It.
Yes.
Like the fact that you can't kill this thing, because if you kill it, it will come into you. And so you want to try and contain that evil. That was something that struck me. Talking about the grandmother, to go to the very, very end. Again, spoiler banner, everybody. But I had to laugh when I was like, wait, he ate her? Like, she's bigger than he is, but that idea of like the physics, I'm like, yeah, demons don't give a shit. They'll just eat. They just opened his mouth and like just swallowed her whole like a boa constrictor.
I also like the fact that the same within in this one and in Terrifier, there's a lot of stuff that he purposely doesn't explain.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole, what does that mean by when you're a cleaner? How does that actually clean the demon? Because all the other stuff is you're fucked no matter what, because you can't kill it, you can't move it, you can't do this. So what exactly is this cleaner doing, since we are taking religion kind of out of it? And the same with like in Terrified, they never give any explanation of really what's going on at that location. And by the end of the movie, you're not sitting there going, well, that doesn't make sense because of this and that does. You don't care, because the story and the characters are passing the story along so well that doesn't have an impact on you.
Well, one of the films that you and I talked about last year, John, The Dark and the Wicked,
This
also reminded me of that, where you just can't win. And in some ways I like that movie because you are just up against an unstoppable force. It's not because of mistakes you're making. It's because this thing's just, it outclasses you every step of the way. Like you're below your weight class or below its weight class, and it is just going to mess you up.
Yep.
But I really like, there's so many great, powerful moments, and as flawed as our characters are, they feel very real. They're frustrating, but they feel authentic. And as many people have said on this panel, like that feeling of dread and that feeling of you're just up against something that is bigger and meaner and more powerful than you and can outweight you, outlast you. Like that's the danger of this film.
Yeah, I really like Jimmy because at first he just seems like he's there to take up space. And then later on, it's like, oh, he's the one who knows the cleaner. He's the one who looks at the thing and goes, this looks familiar. And then he's like a lover boy. You know, there's this whole moment where, you know, he likes getting secrets out of people. That's such a really interesting little character thing that didn't need to be in the movie at all, but they brought it in. So he's not just a silent guy. He's a watcher. He's a listener. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I really like the character work that they do with the brothers, and that how they unveil things like as the movie goes along. And watching it a second time, I was wondering if, because at the very beginning, Jimmy keeps talking about Ruiz, and his brother's like, do you have a problem with Ruiz?
Right.
Like, did he do something? And I kind of wonder if he wasn't like sleeping with Ruiz's wife. Because we learn later that, you know, he's like a Lothario, and
she was pregnant.
She was pregnant. And then it's heavily implied that he also slept with Pedro's wife. So
right,
Santino might
Demon
have been his kid and not Pedro's.
Hadn't even thought about that. Which again, just kind of speaks to how solid this film is. It is streaming on Shudder right now, When Evil Lurks. And thank you all for coming on tonight. Again, this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. We are right at the end of the fundraiser. The link to donate is below in the description of this video. Please make a contribution. It's a cause that's very important to myself and my guests. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.